"Who are you planning to meet after work in that dress?" Matteo DeLuca asked, and every voice on the 47th floor died. Claire Whitmore stood with her back near the gunmetal filing cabinets, the red dress hugging her large plus-size body in a way the entire executive office had suddenly decided was a crime, while the most dangerous man in Manhattan leaned one tattooed hand beside her head and trapped the room into silence. Two assistants froze by the glass conference wall. Vanessa Carlisle's painted mouth curved like she had been waiting all morning to watch a secretary be shamed in public. Claire's ID badge rested against the red fabric. In her left hand, she held a black folder tight enough to crease the corner, but she did not lower her eyes. That was the first thing Matteo noticed. Not the dress, not the whispers, not the way Vanessa had said 5 minutes earlier, "Some women really do confuse attention with importance." He noticed that Claire did not move backward. The private elevator behind Matteo still stood open, flanked by two bodyguards in black suits who looked at the floor, because looking at their boss in this mood was dangerous. Rain streaked the skyline beyond the glass. The marble under Claire's heels reflected the red of her dress like spilled wine. Vanessa lifted her chin. "I told you, Matteo." She walked into the executive review looking like that, while Mr. Vale's private files went missing. If that isn't desperate, it's suspicious. A few people shifted away from Claire as if distance could save them from being associated with her. Claire felt the old heat rise beneath her skin, the familiar punishment of being too visible in a world that preferred women like her quiet, covered, grateful. But she breathed once, slow and deep, and let her soft, heavy presence settle instead of shrink. Matteo's dark eyes stayed on her face. His black onyx signet ring caught the office light inches from her temple. "Answer me," he said, low enough that only the front row heard the thread inside it. Claire looked at the ring, then at the security camera above the copy room door, then at the thin gray dust caught along the hem of Vanessa's white sleeve. 3 details. 3 wrong details. Her thumb pressed against the folder tab, marked Access Revision, 9:12 a.m. "You're asking the wrong question," Claire said. The words were quiet, but they struck the room harder than a slap. Vanessa's smile flickered. One of the bodyguards finally looked up. Matteo did not blink. "Then tell me the right one." Claire's throat tightened, not from fear, but from the knowledge that one sentence could either destroy her career or open a door no secretary was ever supposed to touch. She had spent 2 years arranging Matteo DeLuca's meetings, memorizing who was allowed through which elevator, which lawyers lied with their left hands, which executives smiled before they stole. People thought she was invisible because she was large, soft, and polite. They had never understood that invisible women hear everything. Claire raised the black folder between them. "Ask why someone changed your west elevator access at 9:12, she said, then made sure everyone was staring at my dress when you arrived." For the first time since he stepped out of the elevator, Matteo DeLuca turned his head away from Claire and looked at Vanessa. Matteo DeLuca's gaze moved from Claire to Vanessa so slowly that the entire office seemed to hold its breath with him. The red dress was still the loudest thing in the room, bright against glass, steel, and winter gray marble, but Claire's black folder had become more dangerous than the dress. Vanessa's smile tried to recover. It did not quite make it. Claire felt every stare on her body, every silent calculation about whether a secretary like her had just overstepped, but she kept her hand steady on the folder tab, marked Access Revision, 9:12 a.m. The shame was familiar. The silence was new. 2 hours earlier, nobody on the 47th floor had looked at Claire Whitmore unless they needed something fixed. A calendar moved, a client hidden, a lunch order corrected, a conference room sanitized before men with bloodless smiles and 7-figure watches arrived to pretend DeLuca Holdings was only a real estate company. Claire knew how to be useful without being valued. She knew which executives called her sweetheart when they wanted her to ignore a missing signature, which assistants whispered when her hips brushed a chair in the narrow copy room, which women looked at her red dress and saw not courage, not taste, not beauty, but a violation of the invisible rule that women like Claire were supposed to dress like apologies. That morning, She had almost worn black. Safe black. Disappearing black. Instead, she had stood in front of her apartment mirror, zipped the red dress over her soft, full figure, clipped her ID badge to the neckline, and forced herself not to change. It was not for Matteo DeLuca. It was not for Vanessa Carlisle. It was because Claire had spent too many years making herself smaller for rooms that still found a reason to sneer. At 8:47, she had carried revised board packets into the West Conference suite and noticed the first wrong thing. The security tablet showed an elevator access approval under her initials, but Claire never approved elevator permissions before Matteo's personal guard cleared them. At 9:03, the copier jammed, and while the junior assistants groaned, Claire knelt carefully, balanced her weight with one palm against the machine, and removed a torn strip of paper with Adrian Vale's department code printed across the corner. Nobody thanked her. They were too busy whispering about the dress. At 9:12, the access revision appeared again. This time, it had been backdated. Claire did not panic. She opened the old calendar logs, compared the timestamp to the camera blackout on the copy room corridor, and slid the printed discrepancy into a black folder before anyone saw her hands move. Being underestimated had taught her patience. Being watched for the wrong reasons had taught her where people never looked. Now, with Matteo's ring glinting inches from the folder, Claire understood the danger had finally turned its face toward her. "Miss Whitmore," Matteo said, his voice quiet enough to make the bodyguard straighten. Vanessa took one step back. Claire did not. "You approved no access change today?" he asked. "No," Claire said. "And whoever did wanted you angry before you checked." The words landed softly, but the nearest assistant went pale. Matteo looked past Claire to the small black eye of the security camera above the copy room door. Then he gave one short nod to the bodyguard by the elevator. The man stepped in front of the doors before anyone could leave. "Bring the footage," Matteo said. His eyes returned to Claire, colder now, sharper. "And bring her to my office." The bodyguard did not touch Claire, which somehow made the order feel more dangerous. He simply stepped between her and the elevator, one broad shoulder blocking the only public exit while Matteo DeLuca turned toward the black glass doors of his private office. "Inside," Matteo said, and the word moved through the 47th floor like a blade laid flat on skin. Claire walked because running would make her look guilty, and stopping would make her look afraid. The red dress followed her in every reflection. Glass wall, polished marble, the dark screen of the security monitor carried behind them. Every assistant watched her pass, as if a secretary in red fabric had just crossed into a room built for men who buried problems under legal signatures. Matteo's office was not an office. It was a command center wearing the mask of luxury. Black marble cut the floor into cold squares. A long walnut desk faced the Manhattan skyline. Velvet chairs sat too far apart for comfort. Behind smoked glass, monitors showed elevator banks, parking levels, conference corridors, and a private loading bay beneath DeLuca Holdings where no delivery truck arrived without armed approval. Two men in black suits took positions by the door. Another placed the security tablet on Matteo's desk and backed away without being told. Nobody asked Claire to sit. Nobody asked if she wanted water. In this room, comfort was not offered until guilt had been measured. Claire remained standing, her folder held against her body, the red of her dress brighter against all that black and gray. One guard looked at her shoes, then at the folder, then away. She knew that look. It was the same look the junior partners gave when she entered boardrooms carrying files heavier than their respect. Too much woman for the room, not enough title to matter. Matteo said nothing for 9 full seconds. He removed his black onyx signet ring, set it on the desk beside the tablet, and only then looked at the footage. The screen showed the copy room corridor at 9:11. Empty, then static. 43 seconds of dead gray. When the image returned, Claire appeared at the edge of the frame in her red dress, bending near the copier, one hand braced against the machine, calm and deliberate. "Convenient," one bodyguard murmured. Claire turned her head slightly. "Not convenient," she said. "Edited." The bodyguard stiffened. Matteo's eyes did not leave the screen. "Explain." "The blackout starts before I enter the corridor." The camera light above the copy room was still green when I walked in. Someone killed the feed from the server room, not the camera. Her voice stayed low, but her hands did not tremble. Mateo finally looked at her again, and this time his gaze was colder because it was no longer only suspicion. It was calculation. You notice server lights? I notice what people ignore when they're busy looking at me. Silence settled hard. The smallest shift crossed Mateo's face. Not softness, not trust, but attention sharpened into a weapon. Then the office door opened without a knock. Vanessa Carlyle stepped in wearing white silk and a smile polished for execution. Between two manicured fingers, she held up Claire's spare ID badge, the red lanyard dangling like a noose. "Mateo," she said sweetly, "before you let your secretary perform another little speech, you might want to ask why this was found outside Adrian Vale's restricted file room." Vanessa held Claire's spare ID badge high enough for everyone outside Mateo's private office to see. The red lanyard swung beneath her manicured fingers, catching the light like a ribbon tied around a guilty verdict. Through the open glass doors, two assistants stopped pretending not to listen. One bodyguard shifted his hand near his jacket. Claire felt the room narrow around her. Black marble beneath her shoes, Mateo's ring on the desk, her red dress reflected in the security tablet like evidence somebody had already decided to misread. Vanessa's smile sharpened. "Found outside Adrian Vale's restricted file room," she repeated, sweeter this time. "Which is strange, isn't it? Since Claire claims she never went near that corridor." Claire looked at the badge. It was real. Her name, her photo, her employee number. The spare she kept clipped inside her desk drawer for days when the main badge malfunctioned. A small sound moved through the assistants outside. Not quite a gasp, not quite a laugh, but enough to turn Claire's stomach cold. Vanessa stepped closer, her white silk sleeve brushing the edge of Mateo's desk. Maybe she thought if she came dressed like a warning sign, everyone would be too busy staring to notice what her hands were doing. Mateo did not move. That was worse than anger. His silence made the accusation hang longer. Vanessa looked Claire up and down with practiced disgust. "There are women who understand executive presence," she said. "And there are secretaries who mistake tight fabric for power." The words hit exactly where Vanessa meant them to hit. Claire's fingers tightened once around the black folder. She remembered every morning she had chosen loose cardigans because they made men stop commenting, every elevator ride where she folded her arms to take up less room, every whisper that treated her body like a workplace inconvenience instead of a person standing inside it. But she did not apologize. She did not cover herself. She looked at the badge, not Vanessa. "That badge was locked in my desk," Claire said. "Then perhaps your desk is as careless as your judgment," Vanessa replied. One assistant outside gave a nervous little laugh, then swallowed it when Mateo's eyes moved toward the door. The laugh died instantly. Vanessa placed the badge on the walnut desk beside the black onyx ring, turning Claire's own face upward like a mug shot. "Mateo, you cannot seriously let her stand here and perform innocence because she noticed a blinking light. She has access. She has motive. And clearly, she enjoys being noticed by powerful men." The bodyguard who had doubted Claire earlier looked at the badge, then at her red dress, and for one brutal second the whole room seemed to agree with Vanessa's version because it was simpler. The big secretary, the loud dress, the missing files, the stolen access. Claire felt humiliation press against her ribs, but beneath it, something sharper moved. Wrong. The lanyard clip was on the left side. Claire always clipped it on the right because the metal edge scratched her neck. The plastic sleeve had a crescent of gray dust tucked under the seam. The same powder she had seen on Vanessa's cuff. The same dry residue that came from the executive shredder outside Adrian Vale's file room. Claire lifted her eyes. Mateo was watching her now, not Vanessa, not the badge. Watching the moment her shame turned into recognition. Vanessa reached for the folder in Claire's hands. "Give that to me before you embarrass yourself further." Claire did not move back. Her body became still, grounded, impossible to brush aside. Vanessa's fingers touched the folder's edge, and Claire saw one more thing. A thin red fiber caught beneath Vanessa's diamond bracelet, snagged from the spare badge drawer lining only someone inside Claire's desk could have touched. Mateo's voice cut through the room. "Miss Whitmore." Claire kept her hand on the folder. Vanessa's smile returned. Sure she had one. Claire looked from the badge to the bracelet to the black eye of the security tablet and understood exactly how Vanessa had framed her. Claire understood exactly how Vanessa had framed her, and for one terrifying second, the room waited for her to break. The spare badge lay beside Mateo's black onyx ring like a sentence already passed. Vanessa's fingers were still on the edge of Claire's folder, tugging lightly, testing whether shame would make her let go. It didn't. Claire planted one hand flat over the folder and let her full, steady weight settle through her heels into the marble. She did not shove. She did not shout. She simply became impossible to move. "Don't touch my files," she said. Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Your files?" Claire looked at Mateo, not pleading, not asking to be rescued. "May I use the tablet?" The bodyguard near the door laughed once under his breath, the wrong kind of laugh, until Mateo's eyes cut to him and killed it. Mateo did not hand Claire the tablet. He turned on the desk so the screen faced her. Permission, but not trust. Not yet. Claire stepped forward, the red dress bright in the black room. The same dress they had treated like evidence of vanity, now moving like a warning flag of its own. Vanessa started to speak, but Claire was already typing. Not fast, accurately. The kind of accuracy no one praised, because it only became visible when something went wrong. Employee number. Badge serial. Restricted reader history. She stopped before opening the final log and lifted the spare badge with 2 fingers. "This is mine," she said, "but whoever used it doesn't know how I wear it." She turned the lanyard so the crooked clip faced the room. "I clip it on the right. Always. The metal scratches my neck on the left." Vanessa scoffed. "That is your defense." "No," Claire said. "That's the first mistake." The room changed by a fraction. One assistant outside leaned closer to the glass. Mateo's silence sharpened. Claire tapped the tablet again. "If I took this into Adrian Vale's restricted file room, the reader would show a clean entry under my employee number." The screen loaded. A soft electronic chime broke the silence. "Access denied. Invalid sequence." Claire slid the tablet forward just enough for Mateo to see, not enough for Vanessa to grab. "It never opened Adrian's file room," Claire said. "Someone left it there after using it somewhere else." Vanessa's smile thinned. "You could have staged that." Claire nodded once. "That's why I checked the drawer access." Vanessa went still. There it was. Not guilt. Not enough for a conviction, but enough for Claire. She tapped another log. A secure drawer in Claire's workstation had opened at 9:08 a.m. for minutes before the West elevator revision. Not with Claire's main badge. With an administrative override from Adrian Vale's department. The bodyguard who had doubted her stopped breathing through his mouth. Claire lifted her eyes to Vanessa's diamond bracelet, where the tiny red fiber still clung beneath the clasp. "My spare badge drawer has red felt lining," Claire said quietly. "And the executive shredder outside Adrian's file room leaves gray dust under plastic seams." She placed the badge back beside Mateo's ring. "Your sleeve had both." The office went silent in a different way now. Not the silence of people watching a woman be humiliated. The silence of people realizing she had been counting the knives while they laughed at the dress. Vanessa's hand slipped from the folder. "This is absurd," she said, but the sweetness had cracked. Mateo looked from the tablet to the badge, then to Claire's face, as if the woman standing in front of him had just stepped out from behind every title he had ever used to underestimate her. He did not smile. He did not soften. He placed 2 fingers on the black onyx ring and said, "Everyone out." No one moved fast enough. "Now!" Chairs scraped. Assistants vanished from the glass. The bodyguards opened the door, but Mateo's gaze never left Claire. When Vanessa tried to follow them, his voice stopped her cold. "Not you." Then he looked back at Claire and tapped the folder beneath her hand. "Show me what else you noticed." "Show me what else you noticed," Mateo said. And for the first time that morning, the command did not sound like an accusation. It sounded like a door opening 1 inch. Claire kept her palm on the black folder, while Vanessa stood frozen beside the desk, her white silk sleeve suddenly looking less like elegance and more like evidence. The badge, the red fiber, the gray dust, Mateo's black onyx ring. Everything sat on the walnut surface between them like pieces of a trial no court would ever be allowed to see. Claire knew better than to mistake attention for safety. Men like Matteo DeLuca did not trust quickly. They calculated. The badge was not the breach, Claire said. It was the distraction. Vanessa let out a brittle laugh. This is ridiculous. Matteo lifted one finger without looking at her. Vanessa's mouth closed. Claire opened the folder and slid out 3 pages, each aligned with the same careful precision she used for board packets no one thanked her for preparing. At 9:08, my spare badge drawer was opened with an administrative override from Mr. Vale's department. At 9:12, West elevator access was revised under my initials. At 9:13, the camera feed outside the copy room died for 43 seconds. But the file room reader never accepted my badge. She tapped the page once. That means the point was never to enter Adrian Vale's restricted file room as me. The point was to make you think I had. Matteo did not move, but something in the room shifted around his stillness. One of the bodyguards by the door glanced at the log, then looked away as if ashamed of how fast he had believed the easier story. Claire felt the heat of the red dress against her skin, felt every cruel word Vanessa had thrown at it. But the dress no longer felt like exposure. It felt like proof that everyone had been watching the wrong thing. Why? Matteo asked. One word. Heavy as a loaded gun. Claire drew in a slow breath. Because while everyone was focused on me, someone used the West elevator. She turned the final page toward him. A visitor access request sat there, incomplete and signed, routed through a security subcontractor tied to DeLuca Holdings loading bay. Not enough to convict. Enough to smell blood. Matteo's dark eyes dropped to the page. For a moment, the ruthless calm in his face became something sharper and colder. Not rage. Recognition. Claire saw him understand the shape of it. A breach inside his own house, hidden behind a secretary's humiliation and a red dress everyone had been trained to misread. Vanessa reached for the desk. Matteo, she, is manipulating quiet. The word landed so softly it was almost intimate. Vanessa went pale. Claire should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she felt the weight of what came next. If Matteo moved too fast, whoever stood behind Adrian Vale would vanish. If he moved too slow, someone might already be inside the building. You cannot freeze the whole system yet, Claire said. The bodyguard's head snapped toward her. No one told Matteo DeLuca what he could not do. Claire held his gaze anyway. If you shut down every badge, they'll know we saw the pattern. You'll catch Vanessa, maybe Adrian, but not the person waiting on the other side of that elevator. Matteo studied her for a long, dangerous second. His eyes moved over her face, the folder beneath her hand, the red dress Vanessa had tried to weaponize, and the badge that had failed to ruin her because she knew her own habits better than they knew her worth. He picked up the black onyx ring and placed it directly on top of the visitor request. Then tell me, Miss Whitmore, he said, his voice low enough to make Vanessa stop breathing, who do we let walk in? Claire did not answer immediately, because Matteo DeLuca had used the word we as if it were a weapon placed carefully between them. Vanessa heard it too. Her face tightened, the first real crack in all that polished white silk, but Claire kept her attention on the visitor request beneath the black onyx ring. We don't let anyone walk in, Claire said. We let them believe they already have permission. Matteo's eyes narrowed. Explain. The West elevator revision is the bait they built with my initials. If you cancel it now, Adrian knows I saw the pattern. If you approve it too easily, whoever is waiting downstairs knows you saw nothing. She touched the corner of the page, not the ring. That boundary mattered, so we delay it. Not long, just enough to make them impatient. One of the bodyguards shifted. Boss, she's guessing. Claire looked at him. No, I'm reading a process you never bothered to learn because it came from a secretary's screen. Silence cut sharper than any insult. Matteo did not rebuke her. He only watched, And that was worse, because his attention felt like a locked door opening into a darker room. "Leave Vanessa here," Claire said. Vanessa laughed once. "Excuse me. She's not the hand moving the system. She's the noise." Vanessa lunged for the desk, but Mateo's hand closed around her wrist before she touched the folder. He did not hurt her. He simply stopped her, as if she were falling glass he had decided not to let break yet. "Sit," he said. Vanessa sat. Claire's pulse struck hard beneath her ID badge. Protection looked different from his close. It was not warmth. It was control with teeth. Mateo turned back to Claire. "And you?" "I go back to my desk." No, the word was immediate, cold, absolute. "You were nearly framed inside my building. Your building is why they needed me framed." Claire held his gaze. The red dress, the folder, the badge, the entire morning pressed against her like a hand between her shoulder blades, but she did not bend under it. "If I disappear into your office with guards around me, the person watching knows the trap failed. If I return to my desk shaken but still working, they think Vanessa shook me loose." Mateo stepped closer, not as close as before, not trapping her against cabinets this time, but close enough that Claire could see the faint scar through the ink at his wrist. "You think I'll let you sit in the open as bait?" "I think you asked what I noticed," Claire said, "not what you were allowed to own." The room went completely still. Even Vanessa stopped breathing loudly. For a moment, Mateo looked at Claire as if no one had spoken to him that way in years and survived the sentence. Then, very slowly, he picked up his ring and slid it back on his finger. "You go back to your desk," he said. "2 guards on the floor. Cameras on every hallway. You do not enter an elevator. You do not take a call from Vale. If anything feels wrong, you look at me." Claire's voice stayed soft. "I don't belong to you, Mr. DeLuca." His gaze dropped to her folder, then returned to her face. "No," he said. "But right now, every man in this building who thinks he can touch you belongs to me." It should have sounded possessive. It did. But beneath it was something darker than jealousy and not yet tender, a promise with blood behind it. Claire gathered the folder and walked toward the glass doors, her large, steady body moving through the black marble office in the same red dress they had tried to turn into shame. As she stepped back onto the executive floor, the security tablet on Mateo's desk chimed once. Vanessa's head snapped up. Mateo looked down. The visitor request had changed from pending to approved. The visitor request turned from pending to approved, and the sound was so small Claire almost hated it for being polite. One soft chime, one green line on Mateo's security tablet, and the threat Vanessa had tried to hide behind shame became real. Claire stopped before she reached her desk. She did not turn toward the elevator. She turned toward the ceiling camera, the west corridor, and the reflection of the executive floor in the glass wall. The red dress caught every eye again, but this time the room was not laughing. "Nobody move," Claire said. A bodyguard started to object. Mateo's voice cut from behind her. "Listen to her." That was the first public crack in the old order. Claire crossed to her workstation without rushing, because panic made systems sloppy. Her spare badge was still on Mateo's desk. Her main badge hung against her chest. If Adrian's people had just approved the visitor request, they wanted the system to believe Claire was back at her station, shaken, careless, easy to blame. She sat down, opened the access dashboard, and saw the second betrayal unfold in clean corporate language. West elevator, visitor route active. Destination, executive floor. Security escort, waived. They didn't just approve entry, Claire said. They removed the escort. Vanessa's face drained of color. "I didn't know," Claire said, without looking at her. "You were the distraction." The west elevator indicator climbed from loading bay to 32, 33, 34. Somewhere below them, someone with rival clearance, stolen timing, and enough confidence to walk into Mateo DeLuca's house was rising through the building. Mateo stepped toward the hallway. Claire lifted one hand. If your guards swarm the elevator, whoever's watching the cameras cancels the handoff and burns Adrian. A muscle moved in Mateo's jaw. Then what? Claire's fingers moved over the keys. Not hacking, not magic, procedure. She opened the maintenance delay menu no executive ever noticed because it belonged to assistants, facility staff, and women asked to fix things before powerful men realized they were broken. The West elevator shares a fire safety pause with the freight lift, she said. 30 seconds only. Long enough to make them think it's mechanical. Not long enough to look deliberate. She triggered the pause. The elevator froze at 39. A soft alarm blinked amber, not red. Claire looked at the visitor profile again. The name was blank. The company field was blank. But the phone extension attached to the request belonged to Adrian Vale's office suite. He's still inside the building, Claire said. Adrian didn't run. Mateo's head turned toward his bodyguards. Find him. No, Claire said again, and this time the word landed harder, because everyone knew what it cost to say it twice to Matteo DeLuca. She stood, her large, steady body blocking the narrow path between the executive desks and the west corridor. Not yet. If he sees guards, he destroys the route. If he sees me, he thinks the frame is still working. Vanessa whispered, "You can't seriously send her." Claire finally looked at her. "No one is sending me." She picked up the black folder, slid the visitor request on top, and clipped her main badge so the red lanyard faced outward like a flag. "I'm going because they chose my name to open the door." The elevator indicator jumped from 39 to 43. The pause had ended. Matteo crossed the distance until he stood close enough for the old thumbnail moment to echo: black suit, dangerous eyes, red dress, a room holding its breath, but this time he did not trap her. He lowered his voice. "Claire." It was the first time he used her first name. She felt it, but she did not soften. "Trust the process you hire me to run." The elevator reached 46. Claire stepped into the center of the hallway where everyone could see her. Assistants, guards, Vanessa, even the men emerging from the private council room beyond Mateo's office all turned toward the plus-size secretary in the red dress. The elevator doors began to open. Claire lifted the folder and said, clear enough for the entire floor, "Before anyone draws a weapon, ask why Adrian Vale's office just approved a visitor with no name." And for the first time in DeLuca Holdings, the men with guns waited for the secretary to speak. The elevator doors opened on a man who had spent years believing doors opened because he deserved them. Adrian Vale stepped onto the 47th floor with his cufflinks straight, his silver hair perfect, and Matteo DeLuca's security blind spot glowing behind him like a confession. For one heartbeat, no one moved. Not the bodyguards with their hands near their jackets. Not Vanessa, pale and cornered by her own silk lies. Not Matteo, standing behind Claire with the terrible stillness of a man deciding how many lives one betrayal had just shortened. The only person who spoke was the plus-size secretary in the red dress. "Mr. Vale," Claire said, her voice steady enough to make the guns wait. "You approve a nameless visitor from your own extension and remove the escort. Would you like to explain that before or after I show them the drawer override?" Adrian's eyes cut to Vanessa. Too fast. Claire saw it. So did Matteo. Vanessa whispered, "Don't look at me." That was all the room needed. Matteo lifted one hand, and the bodyguards moved like shadows, closing the elevator behind Adrian without touching him. Adrian's polished mask held for 3 seconds. Then Claire placed the black folder on the nearest marble console and opened it to the access chain she had built while everyone had been laughing at her dress. "The spare badge was planted outside your restricted file room," she said, "but it never opened the door. Your department override opened my drawer at 9:08. Your office approved the west elevator at 9:12. Your subcontractor waived escort at 9:18. And your visitor profile was blank because there was never supposed to be a visitor. The route was for you to move the stolen schedule out and make me the signature they buried." Adrian's mouth tightened. She is a secretary reading systems she does not understand. The old sentence. The old dismissal. The old world trying to put her back behind a desk. Claire did not flinch. She lifted her main badge, clipped correctly on the right side of her neckline, the red lanyard bright against the dress they had called inappropriate, desperate, too loud. "No," she said. "I'm the secretary who built the system you used." The silence that followed was not empty. It was a public execution of every assumption in the room. Matteo walked past Claire then, not in front of her, not to replace her, but beside her. He took the black onyx ring from his finger and set it on the folder, directly over Adrian's access chain. The sound was small. The meaning was not. Every DeLuca man on the floor understood that ring. It meant judgment. It meant family authority. It meant the argument was over. Freeze Adrian Vale's accounts, Matteo said. Lock his executive credentials. Suspend every contract tied to Carlyle Holdings pending internal review. No one clears the West Elevator, the loading bay, or a council room without Claire Whitmore's approval. Vanessa made a broken sound. Matteo, you cannot give her that. Matteo finally looked at her. You are no longer permitted to say her name. Vanessa's face emptied. Around her, the assistants who had laughed, whispered, stepped away, and looked at Claire as if her body made her less credible now, stared at the marble because shame had found them late and with interest. Adrian tried one last time. The council will never accept operational control from the only person in this building who saw what my own men missed. Matteo interrupted softly. They already have. The smoked glass doors to the private council room opened. Men in black suits and older men with gold watches stood inside, faces hard, silent, waiting. Matteo did not pull Claire by the wrist. He did not push her forward as a possession. He turned slightly, giving her the opening. Claire felt the weight of the red dress, the ID badge against her chest, the folder beneath Matteo's ring. Every cruel word Vanessa had tried to stitch into her skin. Then she stepped through the doorway herself. The room rose. Not for Matteo, for the evidence in her hands and the authority he had just placed on top of it. Claire stood at the head of the table beside the most dangerous man in Manhattan. No longer the woman they stared at because she took up too much space, but the woman they waited for because no one moved safely through DeLuca power without her. Matteo's voice lowered near her shoulder. Tell them where to start. Claire opened the folder, looked at the council, and did not make herself smaller. First, she said, we close every door they thought I was too invisible to guard.